podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jen Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. With over 950 million members, LinkedIn provides a goldmine of professional data and intent signals for marketers. But how can you leverage LinkedIn's massive business network to generate more leads and revenue? To discuss cracking the code on getting conversions from LinkedIn ads, I'm excited to be joined by AJ Wilcox, LinkedIn ads fanatic and host of the LinkedIn Ads Show podcast. Welcome, AJ.
So excited to be here. Thanks so much for having me, Jen.
Absolutely. Really thrilled to have this conversation, and we are going to launch right into it. Okay. We're not holding back. We're going to start right. We're going to come in a little bit hot. And I want to know, in your experience, where do most marketers go wrong when they're thinking about setting up their LinkedIn ad campaigns?
Yeah, I think there's two ways that people tend to go really wrong when they start LinkedIn campaigns. The first is actually taking LinkedIn's own advice. You wouldn't think it would be detrimental to your advertising health, but it is. There are like 5 settings that just by default, when you set up a campaign, LinkedIn turns on or has in a way that's not in your best favor. So I'll quickly kind of touch on them. The first, there's a little box that's checked called Enable LinkedIn Audience Expansion. And what it does is, like, you're paying a premium on LinkedIn to target a very specific audience, and it allows LinkedIn to take other people outside of your targeting and put them in. And that's usually not a good fit. In fact, 99.9% of the time. I can't think of a single reason why you'd want to use audience expansion. The next one is called Audience Network. And this is, in theory, it's awesome. It's where LinkedIn allows you to show ads to the people on LinkedIn that you want to reach, but on other sites, other partner sites of LinkedIn's. So you can show up on Microsoft properties and on some kind of smart apps. But what we found is the traffic quality tends to be really low. We've even found a lot of bot traffic coming from it. So I tend to say avoid that, at least at first glance. The third option is when you go down to like your bidding and budgeting section, this is how you're paying for your traffic. LinkedIn turns on maximum delivery as the default bidding method. And maximum delivery is the most expensive way to pay for your traffic on LinkedIn 90% of the time. And we don't want that. So what you do is you get down to the third option that says more options, because they've hidden the cheap one. And as soon as you click that, it will show you manual cost per click bidding. And then LinkedIn will give you this exorbitant range and say, your competitors are paying $20 to $80 per click. Just ignore that wholesale and scooch it down. I like to usually bid significantly lower than what I think I'm going to need, because I can always come in tomorrow or the next day and increase my bids incrementally until LinkedIn all of a sudden starts giving me traffic. So I think those are the biggest mistakes that people make just jumping into the platform for the first time.
That's such like great tactical advice. And actually, I think it's pretty relevant to a lot of the ad platforms out there. I mean, Google's always making recommendations that benefit Google. Twitter is going to make recommendations that benefit Twitter. So any of these digital platforms where you're buying ads, they're always going to be steering you in a way that feels right, but may not always be. But how do people know which of those recommendations are going to be good ones? You know, I hear a lot of people talk about, you talked about the audience expansion, for example, right? People describe that and talk about that a lot as like, well, these are lookalike audiences. These are audiences that are behaving the same way as people that I'm targeting. And so we want them too. But that's not necessarily the case. Like, how do people educate themselves to learn about these things, to know how to make those right choices when they're setting up their ads?
I think the way I would prefer, because LinkedIn turns all this stuff on automatically for any new campaign you create, I would always suggest approaching it the opposite way. Run and have success without those options, and then try turning them on for a limited test and see what it does to your results. Because as you test, that's when you're going to find like, oh yes, it actually is good. Like LinkedIn does have a good lookalike audience for this audience. Or you go, nope, doesn't work well at all. And at least you know. So distrust LinkedIn to begin with, I think, and then test into it.
Yeah, that's great advice. Again, with sort of any ad approach, you want to be testing it and seeing which approach is going to improve your metrics the most. Because ultimately, we're not just after the most eyeballs or the most engagements. We want conversion. So we've got to be like doing the right things to get us there. And what works for one company isn't going to work for another. So the only way to know is to test it.
Amen.
So what are some ways that you've approached your targeting parameters? We talked about the audience network, but actually you're defining your targets in LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn for this reason. It's the only platform that I think actually can help you get close to your target audience. So what are some recommendations that you have that have been most effective for reaching the segment of the audience that matters the most to you?
Yeah. So Jen, you mentioned that LinkedIn has 950 million professionals. They just announced that they eclipsed 1 billion. So this is fantastic news for us. Like you said, like LinkedIn is the only network when it comes to like, I want to be able to target very specific business professionals at scale. There just isn't any other network, no other ad platform that does this very well. And so we have to turn to LinkedIn. This is why we pay a premium to advertise there. And I think with any given audience, I think there's two pieces to it. There is, who is the professional I'm trying to target? And then what kind of organization do they work at? You might tell me like, we sell to CFOs. And I go, oh, but if your product costs, $2,000 a month, are you selling to the CFO of a 2-person company? Probably not. So let's break it into these two pieces. When we're targeting them by who they are professionally, like who the person is, there are 4 kinds of targeting that I really like. There's job title targeting. That's where everyone goes. First off, tends to be the most expensive method. So if you can find a way to target outside of this, great. But it makes a lot of sense, I think, to most advertisers. The second is a little bit more broad, but it's your job function, which is what department you work in, layered with a level of seniority. So if I'm trying to reach, let's say, CIOs and CTOs, I can do job function of IT with seniority CXO or C-level, and I can get that person. And LinkedIn only understands about 30% of job titles. So when we are able to target a different way, but still hit the right person, a lot of times we get less competitive inventory, meaning we pay less to get in front of the same people, which is great. I also really love skills with seniority. Like in the same CIO, CTO example, we could choose some like very niche IT related skills, deep skills in IT, and layer on a C-level seniority. And then finally, number 4, we have an awesome feature that we've had ever since 2008. I don't hear people talk about a whole lot, but we can target all the members of specific groups. So I can go search for groups that only let you in if you're a CIO or a CTO, or I can target just IT related groups and then layer on like a C-level seniority. So that's 4 different ways that you can target that same person, who they are. Then you layer on stuff on the company side. So what kind of organization they're at. We love targeting by company size. So this is the number of employees. You can do large companies, small companies, everything in between. You could also target, if you're not comfortable by company size, you can target by revenue, although I would argue it's not quite as accurate, or it doesn't have as much data. We can target by specific industries. So if you are a CIO or a CTO in this industry, in high tech or in computer software or something, we can show ads specifically to you. And then the last option here that I absolutely am in love with, you probably are all, like if you're listening to Jen, you're probably all familiar with this term, but ABM or account-based marketing, this is where we can target very specific companies by name. go talk to your sales team. You get a list of their like top 200 ideal customers, companies that they want to be able to work with. You can upload that list into LinkedIn, target just the right titles or the right job functions at that list of companies. And now you're getting in front of exactly the right people. LinkedIn has had this option since 2008, and I don't hear many people talk about it, but account-based marketing is amazing and doesn't cost much. You tend to be advertising to smaller audiences, so it doesn't eat all your budget.
Mm-hmm. You know me so well. ABM, LinkedIn is my favorite platform for any account-based strategy. It's the only way to do it, in my opinion. I think there's a lot of like display ad network platforms that you can use for ABM, but I'm big on targeting with LinkedIn. And you know, one of the things that I struggle with some of the other platforms out there is it's tough to validate that you're actually getting the people that you've put on the input, you know, that are actually seeing your ads. But what's great about LinkedIn is when you're putting in all those targets and then your ads are getting served and clicked, you can see in the results, well, what's the percentage of people coming from certain job functions or certain companies? So you know, if you are, you know, targeting whatever, CFOs at a very specific company, Pepsi, then it's going to tell you if you're getting people that don't fit that criteria, which typically tells me like I've messed up something in my targeting. But yes, huge fan of that. I don't want to over-index on the ABM comment because it got me excited, but I have more questions for you. You mentioned like this idea of targeting people in specific groups, which I think a while ago was a really great way to reach specific people. Do you think that like more recently the adoption of actually the use of groups on LinkedIn has declined, or is that still a valid way to target?
Yeah, it's really sad actually. I feel like LinkedIn just totally killed their groups product.
Yeah.
When I first joined back in like 2007, I think it's when I first created a profile. I loved groups. I would hop in, I would join all these groups around topics that I was interested in, and LinkedIn would actively push me towards those. Like, hey, you're looking at this, you might be interested in this group. I think LinkedIn is ashamed of their groups product, what it's become in the last few years. So now you actually have to go like way out of your way to go join a group. But the nice thing for me as an advertiser is if you have ever joined a group on a certain topic, you're probably not going to leave. You're probably going to stay in that group because there's no reason not to. And then it really shows me like more than just your job title, what your passion is. You could have a job title of marketing manager, but if you joined a group about Facebook ads, like I know you are probably a huge Facebook ads fan or invest heavily in Facebook.
Yeah. That's such a good point. I do wish that the group functionality was more what it used to be, but it doesn't seem to be quite as much. I'm going to take a quick pause to welcome Marcello to our live. Thanks for commenting. Keep it coming. Thanks for being with us. Another question for you about targeting. What's your opinion of the email match functionality in LinkedIn? Because I think there's some maybe mixed results that people have with using it. I think everybody wants it to work really well, but what's your experience?
Okay, so I love this feature. There's two kinds of matched audiences on LinkedIn. You can upload lists of contacts, that's individuals, or you can upload lists of company names. And what we found with these contact lists, every other network like Meta, Google, Twitter, Quora, all of them have this ability to upload a list of all of the email addresses that you have. But when we're advertising on LinkedIn, chances are we are in B2B. B2B, most salespeople ask specifically for company email addresses, but a company email address is not the one that you tend to sign up for your social networks, even LinkedIn on. So you're going to end up with a very low match rate if you take the data that you're collecting from your sales team and try to upload it into LinkedIn. But there is a cool hack here, and that cool hack is all LinkedIn needs to do to match you is they need to know who you are in their system, and they don't need to know an email address. So what we found is if we can give LinkedIn a first name, a last name, job title, and a company name, we can leave email address out entirely and have just the same, if not better, match rates on reaching people. So what this means is like your contact list, as you're trying to upload it into Meta and Google, you might get like 10, 15, 20% match rates, but you do this on this on LinkedIn, and you can end up with like 80, 90, 95. They'll never say 100, but you'd have a fantastic match rate. You don't even need to have collected their email addresses.
My brain is exploding at this moment. I've been doing like email match with 30% match rate for years, and I don't think I've ever even tried. I think I'm so like conditioned to believe that like email's the unique identifier in all situations, right? Your CRM, your wherever, right? So I don't even think I've ever tried to do a matched audience without the email in there. Like it's going to be the first thing I do when we get off this live.
Oh yeah. Love it.
I love it. That's amazing. Okay, cool. Well, there's all your targeting tips and tricks. That's super, super useful and helpful. Tell me about like how you think about your ideal LinkedIn ad funnel. Like, what are some of the key stages that a lead might pass through, and maybe different ways that you think about conversion for different ads at different journey stages?
Yeah. So this has actually been like a huge enlightening moment for me over the last few years, because, I started B2 Linked 9 years ago. And back then what we would do is we would cut right to the middle of the funnel. We would show cold audiences, gated content, and then say, okay, now go have your sales reps follow up with those people. And it worked. Like someone would download a guide, and then sales would reach out and they'd say, okay, maybe I am interested in hearing about your product. But that has significantly changed in the last few years. And now that just straight up doesn't work anymore. We have these different stages. I think most would probably understand them as like MQL is your marketing qualified lead. It's like marketing drove this and they gave their stamp of approval. And then it goes on to sales. And then if sales likes it, they market it as an SQL or a sales qualified lead. What we've found is if you use this approach, cold audiences, try to get them to, give them anything to make them fill out a form and then have sales follow up, you're going to have a 1% conversion rate from MQL to SQL. If you're paying, let's say $100 or $200 or $300 for an MQL, do the math. Like that's going to be really hard for most companies to get a return on their investment. So the way we've thought about it, we've totally reimagined. We know in B2B, there was a Forrester study back in last year, 2022, and they determined that it takes 17 touches on average with a brand before a purchase occurs. So we know if we have to have 17 interactions with someone, I want to have meaningful interactions. I want to have interactions that make an emotional connection. And so if you're reading my content, let's say you've read like 3 or 4 of my guides or white papers or ebooks, how much are you going to know, like, and trust me after reading written content? And you'd probably answer very low. But on the other hand, video, if you watch me on video for 30 seconds or a minute, you're going to have a lot easier time making an emotional connection and saying, oh yeah, I know, like, and I'm starting to trust AJ from what he's sharing. So my absolute ideal funnel starts with video. It starts with video that makes an emotional connection. And it's one that introduces your brand, that introduces the why you exist. I have not yet met a founder of a company who didn't tell me like some inspirational story about why they created their company. You want to share that, because if people don't understand the why, they're just going to compare you to your competitors or ignore you completely because they've already picked a favorite competitor. But if you can share with them the why, I relate this to Harley Davidson. I'm not a big motorcycle guy, but I'm amazed by the fact that Harley Davidson has such a following of like avid fans. These are people who will tattoo the Harley logo on their body. And if I were to be marketing for Harley, I would be saying like, this bike has this much horsepower and this much torque and costs this much. If that's how you're marketing, they're going to compare you to Yamaha and Buell and BMW and everything else. But when they know your why, that when you buy a Harley, you are part of the community. You get to live out your dreams. You get to experience freedom. That's the stuff that makes people tattoo your brand on their freaking body.
That's so true. I love that. Like, I think a lot of companies out there do focus too much on the what, right? And who we are, our product, or this or that. And the ones that really do it well, Harley's a great example. I mean, Apple's the example, right, that everybody talks about. I did an interview at another podcast a year or so ago with somebody from Traeger Grills. Same thing. Like, how do you get a grill to be something that people are naming their kids Traeger, right? Is beyond just the fact of how hot you can get it and what you can cook on it, right? And so that why is really important. I love that concept of, or the idea of starting with video to really build that connection, because it does create a, people buy things no matter what it is from people that they like and they connect with and they have empathy with. So I think that's really important. And you brought up an interesting point too about the MQLs and SQLs and the sort of conversion rate from one to another. And I might go on a slight rant at the moment, but this is very top of mind for me because I've been having this conversation a lot with people about the definition of an MQL and an SQL. And I have a huge problem that there's even two, to be honest with you, because if marketing and sales have different definitions of a qualified lead, you got big problems, in my opinion. And if we are only converting 1% of what marketing is supplying to sales into a conversation and an opportunity, big problems. That like marketing and sales alignment is so critical. So if you're a marketer and you're listening to this, like, somebody who gives you a Gmail address, to download a white paper, not an MQL, in my opinion. And if you're sales and you're not getting what you need, like, there's got to be collaboration there. So sorry to go off on a side tangent there, but it's top of mind for me. And I think it's so important to, like you said, 17 touches. So the first one doesn't have to be the conversion. It shouldn't be. It's never going to be. So building up that story and creating a journey for people is so important.
Oh, and I totally agree. It really is massive to make that connection, and there has to be alignment between marketing and sales. I couldn't have said it better myself.
Amazing. So what are some creative ways that you've found to actually nurture LinkedIn leads, maybe while they're sort of in their journey or after they've converted? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think there's lots of cool things you can do here. At first blush, I would say, and this may not sound very creative, but when you're driving traffic from LinkedIn, you are paying a premium. In North America, like the average cost per click is $10 to $16. So if you can imagine, you're paying $10 to $16 to get someone to your landing page. That's a dear price. And what I love to do is have both Google and Meta retarget the traffic that lands on my website, especially from LinkedIn, but it can be from everything. And what this does is, like, if I'm going to retarget on LinkedIn, I'm probably still going to pay like $8 to $12 a click, which is high. And people don't spend a whole lot of time on LinkedIn as opposed to other platforms. But if you're retargeting on Google, you get access to the whole GDN, the Google Display Network, which is like 90% of the web. And then on Facebook, you get access to them anytime they're on Facebook or Instagram. And they're all at like huge discounts. I mean, I've seen where you're paying less than $1 per click for these interactions, and you can show up everywhere. You really can rack up those 17 interactions, but make it so you are, continuously returning to being top of mind, so that when someone feels that pain point, that need, you're the first brand they think of, and it really doesn't cost much to do.
Yeah, for sure. I also think that approach, it makes your Meta ads and your Google ads perform better, right? Because all of a sudden you're narrowing down this wide net, especially with search. This is my problem with like search ads, right? It's just anybody who's searching these terms and it's not actually targeted in any way, shape, or form. So if you can use the traffic that is targeted, these are the people that are interested, and then they search for the keyword that's relevant to the work that you're doing, like, all of a sudden, not only are your LinkedIn ads going to perform better in the long run because you're nurturing them, but your Google ads are going to perform better too. Like, amazing. And those networks are a lot cheaper for retargeting, which is awesome.
Oh, absolutely. Couldn't have said it better.
Awesome. I mean, I should have you on all the time. I need this kind of validation in my life.
Go, Jen, go. Go, Jen,
Yeah,
go.
right? So where do you see, I mean, kind of maybe coming full circle from the beginning of our conversation, like where do you see LinkedIn advertisers wasting the most money in the ads that they're setting up?
I think when they launch campaigns using LinkedIn's recommendations, with audience expansion, with audience network turned on, bidding by maximum delivery, advertising to audiences that are very large, like LinkedIn will tell you, oh, make sure you're advertising to audiences of at least 300,000. And I recommend 20,000 to 80,000, like keep those audiences tight. And it leads to better performance all around and better learnings about who our audience is and what they like. So as people do this, as they take LinkedIn's advice, they're going to pay too much. I mentioned North America's costs are like $10 to $16 per click on average. If you use maximum delivery bidding and your ads don't perform super well out the gate, you might pay $20, $30, $50 per click. And if that's your first exposure to LinkedIn ads, you're going to say, oop, next month, I'm going to give my budget to a different platform. So I don't think it's in LinkedIn's best interest to keep recommending things that are not in their favor. But LinkedIn does like that quarterly revenue that Microsoft reports. So they're probably going to keep doing things that feel like a blatant cash grab.
Totally. Maybe short-term goals versus long-term in that scenario. But I do feel like, those bid numbers keep going up and up and up. And I think we saw a big surge of this during COVID when everything went 100% digital and the prices really increased. There was a lot more demand. And that $30, $30, $40, $50 mark like felt average at the time. But I think the prices have come down a little bit and the tips that you're giving like seem to be a great way to get that channel to be even more efficient.
Oh, totally. Something else we've seen is that over the holidays, if you are bidding by maximum delivery, that default way, what's going to happen is LinkedIn is going to allow all of the advertisers to compete and basically like whoever's willing to pay whoever's budget is higher, I'm going to bid them up. And so what happens is over the holidays, when the audience is cut out because they're on vacation, they have days off, your audience pool disappears. And the few people who are there, all these other advertisers who are bidding by maximum delivery, they just keep bidding higher and higher and higher. And it's this crazy spiral. So my biggest recommendation is before a holiday, make sure you're bidding manually. That way, like as soon as the costs rise past the maximum of where your bid is, you just cut out of the auction. Like LinkedIn stops giving you impressions and you just wait until prices come back down. Yeah.
So it's such great advice and very timely, given where we are in the year right now. So take a look at your ad spending if you've got live ads on LinkedIn right now, and maybe make some adjustments ahead of the holidays. We have a question from our live commenting in. Naliza, thanks for joining us. How often should we be changing ads? We talked a little bit earlier in the conversation about testing, right? So what's your approach for testing ads?
Yeah, so we've actually done quite a few of these tests where we call it a saturation test. We're seeing how long can we run our ads before they stop being effective. And what we found is it's anywhere between about 27 to 33 days when our ad will be clocking along at a certain click-through rate, and then over time it starts to taper off. And so if we can find that out for a certain brand, if we know that it's 33 days is on average, we can go, okay, we're going to make sure that we have new ads at least once per month. Or you can take a different approach and say, we are going to provide variety for our ideal target audience so they're not always seeing the same thing. And we can do this a little bit more proactively. Maybe we let them run for 2 weeks and then refresh and then run something else. This is especially important when you change your imagery. I know imagery is kind of hard to change. You have to get a designer involved a lot of times, but that is the visual cue that people look for to say, oh, I've seen this before. I can tune it out. And so you have a similar image, similar brand style, but if they would take the time to read, it's actually a totally different offer, a totally different ad, but people still act like they're saturated from it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually another question maybe along similar lines, like how how many versions of ads do you test simultaneously? Like, do you ever, kind of say, hey, we're going to run to this same audience 4 different versions of the same ad and see which one performs the best? Or like, what's your approach for that?
Yeah, we do occasionally when the clients have large budgets, but I would say at smaller to medium-sized budgets, what I would recommend is 2 ads per campaign, period. The same rule applies on any other ad platform, Google, Facebook, LinkedIn. If you upload 5 new creatives into a campaign and you let it run, LinkedIn's going to pick, and all the platforms, they pick their favorite 2. So one will get, 50% of the impressions, one will get 35%. And then the last little bit's going to be spread among the other versions. And you'll have some versions that only got like 100 impressions before LinkedIn shut them off and gave them a bad relevancy score. And now they'll never be liable to run or eligible to run just because they performed badly. Like LinkedIn made that call so fast. So if you launch 2 ads at a time, you're pretty much guaranteed LinkedIn's going to give enough action, enough call it sunlight, enough sunlight to both of those to see how they actually perform. And then your A/B tests are going to be a lot more meaningful because both your A and your B got enough data.
Yeah, that's a great recommendation. I think we're always trying to test all the different headline versions and, like you said, all the different visuals, or I've seen it actually maybe create more confusion when there's too many options, or if we're actually, this is maybe another good question for you about ad formats. Do you ever compare a static ad to a video ad, or do you keep those separate because they do perform differently on these platforms? Maybe what are some of the things that you've seen tests that actually maybe create more confusion than clarity?
Yeah, I think there are so many things that we can test, and it's really easy to say, okay, I'm going to create a multivariate test where I actually did this morning. I launched ads. So I had 3 different headlines in that I could use for a brand, and I had 4 different campaigns for them. So I was like, okay, I'm going to put 3 ads per campaign, but I also have 2 images that I want to test, and I don't know how they perform yet, so I need to test the images as well. So what I'm going to do is I have 3 ads per campaign and 2 images, and I rotate them. So campaign 1 has image A and image B and then image A again, but campaign 2 has BAB. And so you really you can get crazy, especially all of this comes to life with pivot tables in Excel. If you can take your data out of the ad platform, which ad is running which test, you can create these amazing pivot tables that says okay, on average, how does this image perform compared to this, or this, this intro to that intro? And I love doing tests like this, but if you try to do it at small budget or for short periods of time, you're going to have data that isn't statistically significant, and you're going to get burned out from arranging all these tests. So I would say if your budget is over let's say 30-40K a month, I think it makes sense to run multivariate tests. But if you're under that, I'd run very straight specific A/B tests on everything you do.
That's great. Great advice. Yeah, thanks for that. And as I was asking the question about the ad formats, another question popped into my mind of what's your experience been with things that maybe people aren't thinking about? And when you think of LinkedIn ads, you're thinking about those sort of in-feed sponsored posts that you see all the time. But what about some of the other options sponsored messages, or some of the kind of sidebar ads that you can place? What's your experience been with things like that?
I love it. So first off, I have to say your in-feed ads should be your mainstay. This is the majority of your account, what you're running. But those right rail text ads, this was LinkedIn's original ad back in 2008. I spent millions and millions of dollars on just these before LinkedIn launched anything else. But what we found, they are only on desktop, and they are the cheapest ad format on LinkedIn. They also don't get clicked on very often, so it can be very difficult to spend a large budget. So why am I telling you how much I love this ad format? It's because when you are running these, you are showing a ton of free impressions of your brand to your ideal target audience. And the next time they see your ad in their newsfeed, they're going to be that much more likely to say, oh, I've heard of that company before. It seems legit. I'll actually read this. I'll spend some time. Or I am willing to click on it. They pass my test. So I love the right rail text ads. They cost next to nothing and they supercharge every other ad format. You mentioned specifically the messaging formats. There's two where all the other ad formats that we've talked about, you can pay on a cost per click basis. Basically, like I'm not going to pay unless someone actually takes action on my ads. Well, you have these messaging ad formats that go to your LinkedIn messaging box, and they're charged very differently. You pay per person that you send it to, and it doesn't sound very expensive. It's like 50 cents to $1 per person you send it to. But then when you look at the stats, it's like, 55% of people that you send it to will open. And then only about 3.2% of those will click on what I'm asking them to click on. So you calculate this cost per click and it's enormous. It's like, $25 to $60 per click on average. And anyway, they do tend to convert better. But I would say, at least for your cold audiences, for your top of funnel, I would stay away from the messaging ad formats. They work a lot better down funnel when people already know, like, and trust you. And when they see your face, your profile, sending them a guide or asking them a question, there's going to be a lot more trust built up there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great tip too, as we're thinking about the journey and what's a top of funnel ad, what's a bottom of funnel ad. The messaging ads are very attractive and very like, oh, we're actually going to be in their inbox, not just something they can scroll past. So you do pay a premium for that, like you said, but knowing what you're getting into. And I think that the journey stage is such an important piece that a lot of times people don't think about. Somebody had asked me, we're thinking about turning off this ad. It's not getting any clicks. And I'm like, well, is it a top of funnel ad? Is it a brand awareness, metric, or is it a conversion metric? If you're serving bottom of funnel message to top of, you said it, right? It's not going to work. So I love that tip. I think that's a great one that everybody can apply very easily into their program that they have now.
Totally. And the really nice thing about the ad formats, there are so many, if you have 5 minutes with Word or Canva, you can create a single image ad very quickly and you can have something to run, and that's great. But video, like we've talked about, you can communicate so much more like emotion and value there. And video is cheap or free. Like you have your own phone with an amazing camera that you can just point at yourself or ask your CEO to point at his or herself and talk, share the company story. Editing for these videos is cheap or free. There are amazing tools right now. Like I'm using Descript or video.ai. Both of them are incredible tools for editing video. And it brings it like when I tell a client we want to create some video ads, they're immediately thinking, have to hire a video crew. This is going to be 6 months out and tens of thousands of dollars. No, it's like, we're talking $30, record it from your phone and you're good to go.
Yeah. And I do think like there was a time, maybe not even that long ago, maybe 5 years ago, where it did, if it wasn't really polished and well produced, it wouldn't perform. And that is so not true anymore. Like we just live in a society of self-recorded video all the time, like TikTok and Instagram Reels and all this stuff that people are accustomed to that format, even on LinkedIn. And it does feel authentic and like you're getting to know an individual, not just, some overproduced piece of content, which there's a place for that too. Like you do want to have some really well-produced video for certain reasons, but it doesn't have to be all the time, which I think is awesome. Like all of a sudden we're real people again, which is great. Yeah.
I attended a talk at Inbound this year by, I forget his name, but, and I'm also forgetting what company, Wistia. His name was Chris from Wistia. And his whole point, he's a video producer. His whole point of the talk was like, don't hire a video producer. Figure stuff out video wise for free and cheap. And then when you see that that's successful, that's when you go and hire a video producer. But like, don't go all in up front, prove out the model first with at very low cost. And I have loved that. Like I followed his advice. You talk about like not having it be very polished. This is so much in our favor. Like people care more about their time not being wasted than the video looking polished. So we do these really harsh cuts, like mid sentence. You cut the video and then jump immediately to the next sentence, leaving very little gaps in between words and sentences. And people actually appreciate that. They don't mind these like harsh cuts because they value the fact that you're not wasting their time. You're giving them information in a fast and like entertaining way.
Yeah, absolutely. And snackable, right? Like easy to consume. I was talking to a videographer actually who had produced something. And I said, I just was really impressed by the audio quality. And he said, this is something we've learned about audiences is that people will tolerate poor quality video if the audio is good. So if you're looking to prioritize like what you're going to do really well and what you might not do as well, like you don't have to worry about the quality of the video itself, the image being perfect, but make sure you got good audio and transcripts, totally subtitles in there for LinkedIn for people scrolling without using the volume. And like, you're good. That's all you need. And I love that approach of like, find something that works and then do more of it, maybe more polished and maybe more refined down the road. But to start with this kind of simple approach.
Well, we actually found a little hack. This might have actually been something that Chris at Wistia talked about, but Adobe has this free tool. I think it's called, if you just Google search Adobe Audio Enhancer, it's a free tool. You just take any audio file, upload it into the tool. As long as it's less than 30 minutes long, it will spit you out a version that like they've cleaned up and it sounds great. Like when I compare it to what my professional podcasting team does, like it's really close. I mean, it may not be perfect, but it's really close and it's free. So even when I take video with my phone, I do try to use an external microphone that's a little bit better quality. But if I don't have access to that, either way, I'm going to run it through this Adobe tool and have all the audio cleaned up. And it sounds like I recorded on a professional mic.
It's amazing. Like what a time to be alive as a marketer. Like we have so many of these amazing tools at our fingertips and like use them and they're free and they're easy. It's so great. So anyways, thank you so much. This was like such a great conversation. I learned so much. I am ready to go upload audience match lists right now. I have learned a ton. So thank you so much for your like really, really like actionable and practical tips. I really appreciate it.
Jen, thank you so much for having me on. I'm absolutely honored to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks everybody for listening in. I'm going to be back with another episode in a couple of weeks. I'm going to be chatting with Lara Varlamova. See you then.